Excellent. Right. A very warm welcome to you all. I think this has actually ended up being the very first of the 2023 STA talks. And we have pulled together a program really at the request of yourselves where we're looking at various aspects of how the STA works, what we do, where things are, equally then delving into development and other practices to really help bridge the gaps for volunteers joining the community, basically. So our goal is basically to make your volunteering experience as easy and straightforward as possible. And if you have any questions, please do ask away while I'm going through these slides. So I love the way Zoom is now covering up everything. So in terms of the STA, welcome, basically. We are a community of volunteers. Probably the biggest change since the pandemic was we had a whole load of people who were on furlough. They had 9 to 5 to volunteer. It's been a really exciting journey trying to see if we still have the enthusiasm and time from people to kind of do volunteering outside work, between jobs and after hours. And the response has been phenomenal. Between all of you, the generosity of the time you give is just, blows me away every single time. The community, in terms of people who've signed up, is over 2,400 now. But, like anything, like a sports club, not everybody's active. And to a certain extent, thank God, because I'm not sure how we'd look after that many people. On average, we probably estimate we have about 120 people active at any one time. And, active can mean many different things in the STA. Obviously, we run talks like this. If there is any topic that you would like to know more about, please do let us know. We also then obviously have a whole series of projects with charities, which gives you that element of client experience, but also that giving back and having an impact on society. And also to make sure that, we really do stay true to the disciplines of technology and get the amplification that we can with the impact, with the work you guys are doing. We have a whole host of solutions that are managed by Michael Von New, who's also on this call. I'm sure we'll a bit more around our solutions for you guys to raise awareness as well. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask me or Michael. Joe Cross would normally be here as well to sort of answer any questions you have in follow-up. But the key message really is welcome. In terms of this talk, what I'm going to cover, it kind of looks at the STA process and our tools. I'll talk about our community of it. I'll go into Slack for a bit with sort of some hints and tips. Jira, specifically how we use it rather than everything in Jira, because that would probably be a 5-day course. Documentations, the opportunities for you there. I go into a bit more of the tech stack and the capabilities that we're building later on in the talk as well. And obviously, lean Jean's here, and as Jean knows, we're always looking for ways to improve, make things easier for people to get started. So all comments and feedback are welcome. You'll often see me reaching out for help, feedback. All of us have the power to make this a great community. The community itself, fantastically, although born in Scotland, is now a really wide mixture of people based across the UK and beyond. Actually, increasingly we have people from other countries joining in, and you're all welcome, basically. In terms of getting familiar with what people do, we've been building a whole series of volunteer stories. They are on our website, but also on Vimeo, and we often push them out on LinkedIn. What's nice with that, it will give you sight of people actively working in the community, what they've been doing, and they talk about their volunteering experience. I should also mention, sorry, they're on our YouTube channel, if you want to find them there as well. If you're not sure how you can get involved, what to do, talking to other volunteers is an absolute superpower, basically. And that really does allow you, to really get the warts and all, because, at the end of the day, you know, we try our best to make things go perfectly every time, but life happens, things happen. And part of technology and part of working on projects is being responsive and is being able to handle those things when they change, basically. So, you know, don't worry if you start doing one thing and it changes, because actually that's quite common. It's all about listening to your clients, to the business when you're working on tech projects. So in terms of external communications, how we talk about the STA, we do that on LinkedIn with a real focus on businesses. We're probably not as active on Facebook as we could be. We are also active on Twitter. So that sort of social media really is all about how we talk externally. Internally, because we're not all in the same office on the same bank of desks, we have to use tools like Slack. And Slack is really similar to the Teams tools, and equally it's like a WhatsApp for work, basically. I'm going to switch very quickly to Slack now, and let's see if it plays balls and comes with me. What screen can you see now? Can everybody see Slack?
It hasn't changed. It's still at the presentation.
We'll do a stop. Thanks, Michael. We'll do a quick swap here. Hopefully now that's Slack, the Scottish Tech Army Slack open.
It does.
Excellent. So Slack at its simplest is a communication tool. It's because we don't have an office, we don't have a premise, we can't sit ourselves all next to a bank of desks. So this is a really nice common way for us all to communicate. Many companies use Slack. So if it becomes something else that you add to your bag of tricks and tools, then for us that's an absolute bonus. The menu, the sort of setup of the screen is reasonably similar to quite a lot of programs these days. You know, even quite a lot of email programs, if you think about it. The channels will always appear on the left-hand side, and channel is just basically an established group of people. Equally, you can send direct messages to, you know, people. Basically, it allows you to do things like favorites, so if there's people you're talking to a lot, and equally there's kind of a whole set of quick access buttons up here on the left. We will create a Slack channel for every single project. The goal is to try and mimic you all sat in a bank of desks. So if somebody's always then reaching out to me directly who's working on a project, I will always try and direct you back into the channel, because more often than not, the question you have, somebody else has, the answer I give you is appropriate to the whole team, basically. It takes a bit of getting used to. My advice would always be over communicate rather than under communicate. The assumption that somebody knows you're delayed on a task, picking up a task, doing it on Word, doing it on Miro, you know, all those things that would naturally happen over a desk, you need to be doing on a platform. It's really useful. There's some easy tips, a bit like probably most of the communication tool. If you do at and somebody's name, that immediately notifies them. If you just write a message and don't put somebody's use the at name, it's not highlighted them as easily. For someone like myself, probably true of Michael and Joe Cross as well, you know, we've got a hell of a lot of channels. I can't look at all of these to find out when you're trying to hail me or say hello. So a big ask would be that you use that at function. When you first start as well, because we're dealing with so many volunteers, because you know, there's a lot of stuff going on, actually, and hopefully Dahlia doesn't mind me using her profile. Filling in your profile really helps us, basically. You know, the email address, you know, definitely is useful, because we do send emails now, as well as using Slack to try and make people more aware of what's going on. If you're a UX designer, let us know. If you're a JavaScript person, let us know, because the more you tell us, the easier it is to find you when we're looking for roles, basically. volunteering really does rely on you sticking your hand up. If you're curious who's on the project team, the group, by clicking on this, it will always show you who's on the group. Messaging somebody will send them a direct message. The search functionality is super powerful. If you're looking for UX, you can type UX, it'll pull back a lot of the notes on UX. In terms of the core channels to get used to, we do ask that everybody does an introduction. Why? We ask so that we know what you're looking for, and we ask so we know what skill sets you have, basically. Sometimes if we have a project team looking for a designer or a project team looking for a front-end dev, I will literally search this channel to go and find people quickly. We are building tools to help us do this quicker and better, but at the minute, this is a really easy way for us to reach out to you and see if we've got opportunities for you. The actual sort of project stuff itself, I'll show you a few more boards a bit later, but that introduction is useful. It also starts your networking journey. So one of the things I would say is, I don't think you're going to find a bigger technical network in the UK. You will, you know, I think we're rivaling some technology teams and even in techie firms now. So there's a wealth of people to ask questions, and there's a wealth of people willing to give their time and help. So with anything, looking for jobs, moving jobs, establishing your skill set, networking is a superpower in terms of doing that. And, you know, I know Teresa, who's here, has had great fun reaching out to a couple of people who've been incredibly generous, taking, you know, sharing user research ideas. You know, we've had other volunteers help us write guides and things to think about. So, you know, collectively, these things come much better when we all work together and we all communicate with this stuff. I don't intend to go through any more of this. There is a random channel, and there is a fun bit where if you do most of the commands, if you do /, that will show you all the different commands that sit within Slack. The Giphy one is always funny. It's exactly the same as finding pictures and stuff like that, if you spell it right, basically. That one will give you GIFs, basically. So always a bit more fun. And eye-catching if you're looking for people. Any questions, guys, before I sort of... I'll take silence as a resounding no. Brilliant. Right, let's switch the screen back. So in terms of volunteering, I think the most important advice we give everybody basically is be honest with yourself about how much time you have. Do not overcommit. It's stressful. We don't want you stressed. We want you to enjoy yourself, basically. It's also much easier for us to make sure you get what you want from this experience if you know what you want yourself. Do have a think about that, basically. If it's, you know, trying out a new skill, moving into a new area, networking, getting exposure to different things, you know, that just helps us ensure you get the best possible experience while you're with us, basically. Again, to echo, you know, networking starts here, basically, and there is people all across different industries, and sharing techniques and sharing ways of doing stuff, as well as a whole series of people in academia. And really, you'll get what you give. Don't hold back. If it feels scary, just dive in. There's plenty of friendly people that will help you on your way. And, you know, we really would encourage you to just get stuck in. Whoa, here we go. Here's the first of the technical diagrams. So this is not an uncommon format that you would see probably in businesses, particularly if you were doing current state models where you're starting to look at people, processes, and what systems you have effectively. This really was to pull on a page because everybody likes projects on a page. An quick overview of the tech we're using, just to give you an idea of the tools that we kind of have in the background. Digital marketing, pretty standard stuff with the sort of external, with the LinkedIn and Twitter I mentioned previously. And the kind of assets we're pulling together are podcasts, case studies, posts, graphics, blogs, all that kind of good stuff. Our website, just to be transparent, it's on Squarespace. We use Airtable to store information, and we're increasingly shifting to HubSpot to be a single our source of the truth for volunteers and the charities that we work with. We have a fantastic tool that Michael is our absolute guru on called Zapier that keeps everything right and keeps has the ability to really easily link systems. If you are thinking of doing anything where you are having to transfer data between one system and another, I would highly recommend you look at it. I've been blown away about how pluggable it is with various systems. Michael, do you want to add anything, or?
No, as I said, Zapier is a very powerful tool, but it requires you to understand what the other tools do for it to be able to work. It is easier than writing APIs, but at the end of the day, it does require deeper knowledge and understanding what everything's meant to be doing.
But which is probably true of most things. You need to understand the process before you automate it. Otherwise, the danger is you create garbage. So the other tools we use Jira for projects. We use Jira to manage projects from requests coming in the front door all the way through to status reports and stuff like that. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail later. A core platform for us is AWS. Again, Michael is the master of that. We originally used Confluence as part of the Atlassian, I should say, Atlassian own Trello, Jira, Confluence. We started with Confluence but have moved to Notion. A lot of the tooling we look for at minimal cost or open source. We use HubSpot as a CRM system. It's I'd recommend it for startups, very simple to get going with. It's not an enterprise-wide CRM system. We use GitHub for all the code, spreadsheets. There's a whole load of Excel, Google Sheets stuff we use. We use Eventbrite at the moment, as you will all know, for events. Trying to move away from it because it's a little bit pernickety. There is the calendar app that was connected to the previous wiki that we had, and we use Canva for a lot of the design work. Canva is dreamy if you're having to put together anything that needs to look nice, like this presentation, for example. In terms of operations and other bits and pieces, we've got Dropbox for file sharing, particularly when you're building websites, quite useful for getting logos, files, pictures, and all that kind of stuff from charities. The G Suite, so our emails are all on G Suite. Slack for internal communications. When it comes to meetings, we don't have a community-wide tool, so we don't offer you meeting software because there's too many of you and we can't afford it, to be blunt. But equally, Zoom allows you 45 minutes free. Google Meet is completely free. A lot of the kind of local authority or pseudo government charities or I can't think of what to call them, but the third sector that we deal with use Teams. So really the advice with that is, depending who you're working with, depending who the project's with, you tend to agree that up front. I think most people do use Zoom, though, just to let you know. DocuSign we use for the volunteer agreement, and Amicus for background checks. There is always the potential working with charities that we might need to do more sophisticated checks rather than the basic checks, which in the UK is called a PVG, and that's run externally basically. Any questions on any of that? I'll go into a few more of them in detail. No, excellent. That means I covered everything. So finding projects, the eternal question I get all the time. We're in the process of building an app, a volunteer app, which is built with React Native, Node.js, and a JavaScript backend. It's in process and really has been what I'd say a frontier project for us, making sure that we've got GitHub set up properly with sufficient annotation, with sufficient guidance for people, and has really helped us push, as well as a lot of the projects Michael is running. Are we making this easy for people to get set up, get their machines running, and start contributing to a project as soon as possible? It's something we're continually working on. We are currently looking at GitHub code spaces. There is a talk, I think on the 24th of February, that will go into much more detail about that. I am not an expert on GitHub. So at the moment, the easiest way to see the sort of full list of projects is via the link there. You do receive that link in the email you get after the orientation, but if you want me to resend this, and you can save it as a bookmark in Slack if you want, it is already in the volunteer opportunity channel as a bookmark, but that really does point at the resource request that we have currently open. If you could always talk to myself, Michael, any of the team, you know, there's loads that we can and should be doing. So, you know, always come and give us a tap on the shoulder if you can't find something. Projects don't magically happen. They do take time to get up and running. They do take time to get the teams together. We are acutely aware that effectively with a lot of the, you know, volunteer teams, we're introducing you to strangers. You're meeting people for the first time. But I guess what I'd encourage you to do is think about it like joining a sports club, joining a new company. You know, you'll get to know the people. The more effort you put in, the more you'll get out. And it's really good practice. We've had a whole series of volunteers who've also started work, and increasingly people are working remotely. So you don't have the same sort of sat next to somebody getting to know them that you used to. You know, that's not true of every job, but the skill of getting to know people remotely, even if you end up working in an international company and you're talking to the guys in the States or the guys in, you know, Asia, it's always a skill set to be able to build relationships in that way. For every project, when it's ready to go, we have a video which is stored on Vimeo. I'll send an example. You can have a look at it. We ask that they're about 3 minutes, and really the preference is that you get to watch. You know, I think at the minute there's about 20 odd opportunities open. You know, you don't want to watch 20 videos of me. So this allows you to get that first connection with the charity, see who's talking, and really we ask them to give a bit of background to the charity, and equally the problem statement. Just like normal projects that you would get in an office, people tend to head towards the solution because people like knowing what's going to happen next. A lot of what we try and do at this first stage is bring them back to the problem statement, because technology may solve some of the problem, but not all of it. And at this stage, it can be really important to say what bit the technology could solve, rather than it kind of being the fixer of all things. Often, you know, and Jean's on the call, there might be some part of a business process that needs to change as a result. There may be some bits where you kind of go, actually, that happened once in a blue moon. It doesn't make sense to spend thousands of pounds on tech on it. So, you know, that problem-driven approach we've found really successful, really partnered with, and the screenshot here is basically the one pager we do at the beginning to describe the project. What are the outcomes they're after at this stage? We do get charities trying to solve every problem at the same time. Will always try and get a single project out the gate first, so that they get used to what it's like working with volunteers. It's not the same as paying for paid resources. Most people are doing, actually probably most people are doing between 4 and 8 hours a week. If you then put that all together in a 9-to-5 way, you can see where a company would be able to get something done much quickly. If you're doing 4 to 8 hours a week, it spreads out the delivery time. So the other things we do early on in the triage stage of projects is have that conversation to manage expectations with any project. It is always worth bearing in mind that you will need to manage those expectations. If you're going to go on holiday, if you're going to go away, let somebody know. They don't automatically know that. And one of the things we'd strongly recommend when you start working on projects is you set up regular meetings, because part of that will also highlight to you if the project's slipping. If you've kind of got to the following week and done nothing, you need to be transparent with that. It's often fine, but it will impact how much progress you get. It's a good discipline generally to get onto. Is there any questions on any of that? No, excellent. Our projects, just to give a bit of background, our projects, we work with charities. There are lots of different types of legal setup. So you'll see them called SKIOs, not-for-profits, but ultimately we don't work with, we don't do projects for corporates. We don't want to replace the tech sector. We want to encourage and help it grow. So, you know, quite often we have had requests from sort of startups looking for extra resources. We then direct them. There is a channel called Founders, and we direct them there. You know, it's not appropriate to look for free stuff from people. That, you know, the normal convention, if you're looking for work or development work as part of a startup, is the person becomes part of the company at that stage. So, you know, very much we try and make sure that there's fair asks, but we wouldn't kind of wrap our arms around a project that took that through, basically. We do look to find at the early stage the most efficient way of delivering value. We are not going to be able to deliver enterprise-wide international systems. You know, it's not our sweet spot. What we often do to get, so the charities we work with quite often are not technical. There's only a couple of them. They're on a journey learning at the same time. It's a really good place to practice talking to people in plain language and getting good at explaining what you're going to do next. So, you know, that kind of trying to find an easy to get to outcome that then delivers value is really what we're trying to do at that first stage. So where a charity comes in and says, we've got 5 problems we want to solve, and they're their finance system with a CRM system with some data stuff, we will look for one project to get going, to get that awareness cadence going. But equally, most of the charities don't have enough people to be able to manage 5 projects at the same time. Everything we do is open IP and open source in GitHub, and you'll see in GitHub that we've, you know, attached the Apache license to that. I am not an expert on that, so please don't ask me any questions on Apache. Our solutions, of which Michael von You here is the master deliverer, is, you know, we really have touched on looking at an STA website hosting, because we do get a lot of requests for websites. You know, a hell of a lot of charities have recognized that their sites are not great, but equally, you know, they were built by one volunteer 5 years ago who's left, and they're struggling to maintain it, or they've sort of installed so many different WordPress plugins that they've lost track of what everything does, basically. So a bit like older companies that end up with technical debt, we do find charities with a degree of technical debt as well. Currently, Michael, what would you say your main one is? The main one at the minute, the LMS Moodle project?
Yeah, it's trying to get a coherent solution that doesn't trap anybody in a platform.
Nice.
Because at the end of the day, we want to offer something to everybody that if something else comes on, or they want to bring an extra module in, they can do it easily.
Nice.
Because we don't want people in the organizations to depend on us to do basically their everyday running of the office.
Brilliant. So if you're curious about learning management systems, Moodle is quite extensively used. And, you know, you never know, Michael's always looking for help. So he's your man. And really just to highlight data. Data is something we will be definitely doing more on in terms of this talk series. I will always say to a charity, do not send data to any of the volunteers unless we've got a non-disclosure agreement in place. It's to protect them, it's to protect you. We definitely need to do more in that space, because, you know, charities, especially if they've got memberships or donations, it's a lot of sensitive data. So always think twice when you get started in that respect, basically. We do have notes and guidelines on that if you want to see them as well. So project tools. I think I touched on meetings. You know, meetings, the choice of tool set is yourself. One of the things I would say with volunteering and meetings is exactly the same as the workplace. Not everybody's always there. the discipline of summarizing key highlights and actions on the Slack channel is invaluable. If you're doing lots of different things, you know, doing a project and then going and looking after the kids and then going and maybe some part-time work, it isn't always easy to remember what was said in the last discussion and where you left it. It's actually also really, really common to not nail down the actions and not really agree who's going to pick up on something. So really getting that noted is a great way of just being honest about where you are, and the act of going back and saying what really happened in that meeting gives you a much better picture of whether it was successful or not, and whether you achieved what you were trying to achieve. If you don't do it, you'll fumble along, basically. The art of managing meetings is something that will always be noticed at work. It's a delight to go to a meeting that somebody manages properly. It's awful to go to a meeting where you sit there going, why am I here? So, you know, do think about the purpose of the meeting, why you're there. And if it's not needed and you're 10 minutes in, don't be afraid to say, right, let's regroup later, not enough work's been done. People will always thank you for getting time back. It's incredibly frustrating going to a meeting that doesn't really do anything. You know, very, very simply, I will always put key bullet points in the Slack channel. Because of the nature with the volunteers, it's not like we're all in an office where you can make people basically turn up to meeting room 315 and it's very obvious if somebody can't make it. With volunteering, stuff comes up, kids get sick, you know, there'll be somebody who's desperately trying to get there but a work meeting overruns. It's really nice to give them, here's the key things that happened and here's where we are. In terms of project tracking, very conscious that writing status reports when you're in a massive organization is important, because telling other people where the project is, how it looks, you know, it is needed for senior management, for aggregating up reports to the board. But when we're volunteering, we kind of understand it's not the most fun, the most sexy thing to do, basically. So what we've done is kept the reporting pretty simple. The ask really is we have an estimated delivery date to give you the sight that it is a project, and the difference between project and a job is that a project finishes. And the other side of things is we've got a traffic light system, sort of red, amber, green, and that's really if you're kind of going, oh god, it's heading the wrong way, flicking that to amber allows us to kind of go, right, actually we can go in and talk to that volunteer and see if they're okay. Or if you sort of think, actually I think I might get this job and I'm going to have to go and concentrate on the job for the next few months, it lets us start the conversation of, right, let's try and get somebody in before you go, rather than a dump and run, basically. So we're always trying to make sure there's a smooth transition in the projects, basically. It's not easy to do, so all of your help making that happen is invaluable. In terms of files, Word, Excel, other documents that you build, you know, definition documents and things like that, we have a mixture of the Google Drive and Dropbox, basically. You can choose. Lots of people like Dropbox because you can access it from everything. In terms of design, as in app design and screen design, we use Figma. So that's something we would set up for you so that the designs stay within the STA. We use GitHub for all the code. As part of sticking your hand up for a project, you'll get invites to Jira, you'll get a Dropbox set up and told where it is. If you need Figma, at that point a Figma board would be set up. You might need a tool like Miro or Mural. We don't dictate which of those we use. They both operate very similarly, so it could be your preference, and you'd get a GitHub invite at that point. If you want to have a look in GitHub ahead of time, you are more than welcome. Just let us know, basically. It is open and the projects are there. What we have found, just so you know, with some of the corporate partners that we're starting to deal with, is access and machines are locked down a little bit more. So we're looking at managing the backlog in GitHub for some of those projects. It looks, I'm not an expert in it yet, but it looks really similar to Jira with that kind of Kanban board approach. And if you don't know what Kanban is, I always think about it, if you were going to stick lots of post-it notes on a wall, it's a very similar look and feel. And you move them between stages as you define, basically. And AWS is the little home that we're parking all the projects at the moment. And Michael's becoming increasingly our guru of all things AWS. Project reporting. I'll flip to it really easily, but you know, basically what we ask is it's really crucial for us in terms of the impact of the project when you're done to understand how long you're spending. It's a really simple, 3 days, 4 days, 5 hours, whatever it is. It is probably better to log the time as you go. That really just helps us with our impact reporting at the end. So there is actually a separate Vimeo that demonstrates how to do that, but I'll flip to Jira in a minute and take you through that. We've tried to keep the status reporting super simple. Basically, we really are just after the headlines of what you're after. Equally, one of the bits of information we're always interested in is where you are in terms of solution, and we'll keep talking to you that through the journey as well. The Jira also becomes almost like our single source of the truth. That's where we signpost where everything is. So if you were storing stuff on different systems to kind of draw up the picture, please just put it there. The beauty is then we just don't keep asking you the same questions, and because everything we do is online, it's really easy to link up all the bits and pieces. Before I go into capabilities, I will swap very quickly over to Jira. Now, Jira, for those of you that are Jira experts, is an absolute beast. It does loads of stuff. Atlassian as a company is the parent company that owns Jira, and they, in true technology style, have gradually bought up lots of different software providers. So Trello is owned by Atlassian, Jira is owned by Atlassian, and Confluence is owned by Atlassian. There's a whole host more. I won't bore you with the list, but they do work. The nice thing then is they all do kind of play well with each other, and they do kind of work similarly, basically. So what we've tried to do is avoid some of the things that you will see in larger companies and really keep everything we do super simple. I'm going to show you the triage board just so you get a sense of what's happening. It's not a dark art or a black box that you can't all see, but ultimately what we try and do in the triage team is get the projects ready for somebody to drop in and get going quickly. The ongoing mission, and I don't think I've mastered it quite yet, is to get people up and running as quickly as possible. It's never going to take away from the fact that you need to turn up with any project with your thinking brain. If you don't turn up with your thinking brain, it's not going to work. I can't give you a checklist for every project because they're all different. The clients are different. Where a charity is different. And actually, it is a real skill set and a real art managing projects, getting to know the nub of the problem, because within solving the problem, you also need to understand the capability of the team at work, the charity you're working with. So there's lots of different factors in play that give you the success of a project. Also probably worth saying around projects, getting people at the early stages to think about when it's done helps them realize that it's going to finish and also helps them realize that you're not going to be there forever. So the goal with a charity when we build a website is that they can maintain it themselves, and the confidence build and the oh my god, we're not in such a rut is a lovely thing to say. It's what we don't want to do is they then get beholden to expensive resources or expensive last minute contracts for maintenance. The goal is that they spend that money on the if they're working with kids in care, those services and that stuff. So I will now share. Jira is all online as well. It has a nifty little app on your phone, slightly addictive, but so all these things take you through. You'll see again, like Gmail, like the Outlook stuff, you always have that kind of menu board on the left hand side, core menu up across the top. Put my teeth back in, and the Kanban board for me has been my preferred setup. It does allow you to see things and list views and other bits and pieces like that. When a project comes through the door, very much so it lands in what's called the triage team, and I will show you what happens and talk through at very quick level what happens at this stage. Initial triage. So these filters basically allow us to see who's working on projects. There's a long list of people running projects there. It always defaults to unassigned, which is sort of fun and not fun. Request received is very much the projects just come in through the website. We get more projects through word of mouth. We get projects through going and trying to find them with aggregators like Inspiring Scotland, and you know, and equally all sorts of requests. Each request has almost like a core ticket that sits and holds the whole information. It's the easiest way to identify anything, as we'll all know from technology, is unique IDs. The unique ID for a project is the JIRA ID, basically, and that sits in the top left-hand corner, and is hilariously sometimes there are people who will quite happily talk in JIRA IDs, and sometimes I even know which one they mean. So just shows what happens when you do this stuff for too long. From the website, we get a raw description that comes in from the charity. Sometimes they write loads, sometimes they write nothing. Ultimately, at this stage, they don't give us information about the charity itself and what it does. That comes from conversation with them and questioning. The request information here just takes you through actually when it came through the door. The organization is the charity itself. And then for our impact reporting, we try and find out where the charity is based, what sector it's looking after. And we talk about target areas for the STA. So we kind of had 3 pillars right at the beginning. One was digitizing the third sector. One was connected to promoting employment pathways. And the third completely escapes me, which I apologize. Project admin. When I spoke earlier about as the project develops document stores and things like that, this is where we hold the roots to everything, basically. So what that allows me to do is let a much larger number of projects run than I can work on individually, if that makes sense. The video is the video request I mentioned earlier. You know, the charity asking for help in their own words, kind of, and introduces them in a nice way. Every project when it starts gets a Slack channel. The JIRA link is there. Some projects, not all projects, ask for a JIRA board. I'll show you some examples of the JIRA boards. The document store predominantly is Dropbox, but some people do ask to use Gmail, so we would just point to the Gmail. The Notion link, as bigger projects get going, there's more need for onboarding people, sharing notes. So Notion is also useful. It's a wiki, just to repeat that. The Confluence link is there for the older projects, so that's legacy stuff. Case studies, we're always after them. So if you're on a project at the minute and you think there's a case study there, let us know. The project resources is where we list who's currently working. This project is currently in triage discovery, so we obviously don't have a volunteer. We did, just as way of an example, John Reek is a project a volunteer who kind of comes and does short stints with us, who's a telephony expert. We reached out to him to have an initial conversation with the charity, just to, you know, talk more specifically about what they were after, and he was able to answer a few more questions, but he's not full-time on the project, as it were. The project status that we just touched on, that's where this screen is here. The RAG status, you know, this one's amber because it's been there for a while. We're not finding it easy actually to find volunteers with telephony experience, ironically. The estimated delivery date would be there once the project starts running. The triage summary is where we have a weekly triage recce where we just sort of say, how are things? A lot of what we're trying to do is highlight a volunteer stepping away so that we can replace somebody efficiently. The project commentary here, bullet points, high level, you know, going well where we are. and the path to green would be connected to if the RAG status goes, and that just helps us know why you make it red or amber, basically. This is a really good reflective process for everybody, whether you're a project manager, a scrum master, a developer. It's that thinking about what's coming next, and also it's a useful way of banking your achievements, because it's so easy when you're doing projects that go on for a long time to forget what you've done. So even if you use this as the discipline of saying, right, this is where I've managed to get, that's incredibly useful. The nice stuff with Jira, just so you know, is it is really good at sharing stuff. You can actually even email people from here, or you can share the information on Slack. The copy links, if you're trying to refer people back to stuff, work the same way with Slack. You know, there's a lot of similarities with how these systems work. Jean and I have had a whole conversation using the apps here. I might use you at the minute, Jean, if you don't mind. And immediately that will highlight, and that also flags to people that you've asked them a specific question. So the beauty of doing that here is it keeps it all connected to the project at its helicopter view, if that makes sense. But you know, the Slack channel's there for more chat and the project day to day, basically. We use this a lot more in the triage phase of a project, while we're trying to find out if the charity is responsive, find out if they've got enough time, find out if they've asked for a sensible first step, or whether they've gone way beyond their capabilities, sort of thing. And really that assessment. So within the assignee becomes the key person working on the project later on. The triage team member is whoever has worked with the charity to get that initial definition. If it goes into an STA solution, so community council solution, digital confidence training, we would flag that here as well. I'm not going to go into all of those in this talk, that you have to wait for the next one. And equally, this is where you can log time. So the time tracking is super straightforward. The screen just brings this up. If I've just spent an hour, I can do 1H, and that saves it. You can even write here what it was. So if it was a particular document. So what that might be useful for you is, if you are doing a phase of a project, it gives you an understanding of how long you have spent on it. So it's useful for us, but it's also useful for you, because when you get started, estimating is a dark art. It's very hard to know how long things are going to take you, and they always take you longer than you expect. Conscious we've got 5 minutes, so I will roar through this very quickly. Discovery is really where we're trying to get that one pager that I showed you earlier together, and equally chasing the charity for the video. We then go into volunteer search, which is where we raise a resource request for a web designer, for UX, for a BA, whatever's appropriate. And we may raise a few if there's a project team that we're trying to get together. The project team and pulling together people takes a lot more hands-on, a lot more talking to people, and a lot more trying to get the conversations going. I haven't started a single team where everybody immediately starts talking to each other. It just doesn't happen. It takes a bit of time, basically. So all of your help with that is invaluable. The volunteer introduction highlights when we're ready, the team's ready, or the volunteers ready to go and meet the charity. And that's where we start that journey. And then at the minute, we've got 38 projects underway. Rejected might be that the charity decides to do it differently, has gone elsewhere, it isn't a charity, or they're not responding. We do surprisingly have charities that go quiet. They don't like waiting for the resources all the time, but we're a volunteer community, so nobody is mandated to do the projects. On hold might mean that the charity is super busy doing other things, or they don't have the resources. We do see a lot more people moving jobs and moving on in charities than I've ever seen in private companies. So what that might mean is you lose your contact, they're hiring somebody else. So we just say, right, let's start when you're ready, or when you've made some decisions, basically. So we regularly go back to them saying, do you still need help or not? Again, Jira, the search is super powerful, exactly like Slack. Don't spend hours looking around. You can search for stuff quite easily. This board you will not see, because this is a working board, and the idea is that we don't confuse you, but hopefully that kind of what's happening before it gets to us is useful. Probably the volunteer app is the longest using board, so just to give you an idea, this is a mixture of the backlog and what's been worked on in the current sprint. Basically, it has all of the tools, and it can allow you to have the epics. There is, I know, you know, this is quite a similar ticket. It allows you to, you know, we've added the Figma screen so it can cross-reference to the Figma screen. You could see a whole load of text information here just to try and get conversation going. If this was a screen design, there might be a link to Figma, or there might be a screenshot. The discipline that has come out of the last retro from that project is really to make sure there's a definition of done. So, you know, we're building up examples of good to help people kind of get going a lot quicker between the bits and pieces. So that I don't miss it, because I do think it is another important part. We obviously do a lot of stuff, but we don't do everything. And one of the things we're trying to get a bit more definition for people joining is really around our capabilities and the projects we've done, what we've touched on, and where there's less practice, as it were. So in terms of websites, we've now built quite a few websites on a mixture of Odoo, WordPress, and Squarespace. So there are examples, and there are, you know, ways that we can help back you up in terms of CRM. Not as many projects, but we have touched on Salesforce and we've touched on HubSpot. And Odoo does allow you to use CRM, but we haven't done the CRM project in Odoo. Moodle, Michael was talking about earlier, we have done a project on the Power Apps now. We would like to do more, and that touched on donations as well. We have a few requests around booking systems, so we may do a bit of get people together to see if we can get something on booking systems. And Daniel, actually, who's on the call, has been starting to look at that. Dashboards, we've used Power BI and Raw Tech. I'm also going to pull a tech stack example together that we'll be able to share as part of this summary for people. In essence, basically, there's a lot we've done, there's a lot we can do. The tooling hopefully is easy to use. If you start going and it's not, let us know. And we are constantly and currently trying to pull together a little bit more the examples of good and the examples where people have done stuff. So there is now for static websites, a volunteer guide and a charity guide. And that's really designed to set expectations and get a lot more concise information to all of you. Equally, Teresa, I know you're doing a lot of user research at the moment. We're pulling together the user research in an easy to consume way. So if you're somebody that likes helping put this stuff together, let me know, because there's loads we could do. And really all of those guides are designed to helping people a bit nervous. All of you are capable. You know, I remember sitting down with the triage team about a year ago, and they were like, oh my God, how can we give building a website to somebody that's not built a website? And it's basically like, most people who have finished a coding course can build a website. That can transform a charity. It's super simple. It's within your skill sets. It gives you the client access. It gives you the technical, how does it all work? How do I set it up? So don't underestimate what each bit of work gives you. And it's useful, you know, from somebody that started on a graduate training scheme, they deliberately make you do all the roles so that you understand the pain points and the asks. And it's a really good thing to look at things from all perspective, because projects rely on you finishing something often and handing it over to somebody else. The longer you take, the more you take time from somebody else. Often the dates don't shift. So it is, with that teamwork, collaboration, working together, really useful to know how all those bits and pieces go. I'm conscious I haven't really given time for questions, so I apologize, that took a lot longer than I thought. But any questions? Conscious of time, sorry, Jean, I saw a message come up there. The different guides, we're pulling that together. So Notion ultimately would be, sorry, I'm probably reading the last question there. So George, and feel free to talk, because otherwise I've just heard my own voice for an hour. Thank you, George. The guides will be on Notion, but at the minute, most of them are on Slack, or you can ask for them on Slack. But
I have a question. I was wondering about the project status, like weekly update. Am I supposed to delete the old one and put a new one, or put like date and just put a new one underneath, or how does it work?
yeah, date and a new one underneath, and that just gives the running
But
commentary.
then if there's not much like change, like is there any point of giving a weekly update? Like,
yes, because if it says no change for a month, something's probably not right.
sorry,
So,
what did you say? Did you say to put a new one underneath? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Okay.
and what because it does happen that the charities get busy, or people go on holiday and stuff like that.
What's happening.
Yeah,
cool.
so yeah, and it means there's a difference between a planned pause and something slipping, basically.
Yeah,
and
so
sometimes it's
so you don't have to read in the channel, like see what's going on. Yeah. Okay, I get it. Yeah, thanks.
and I genuinely can't see how we would get more than 40 projects going, but hopefully we might. And that's where all these communication tools really, really help. So yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you.
I just wondered, Joanna, you probably know what I'm going to ask. Is there any scope for the STA to give another project tool for research, in particular for remote user testing? Because that's where I'm kind of stuck at the moment, is I want to do some one-to-one interviews, which is fine to do over Zoom or something, but ideally do some testing of the website, which is a bit of a struggle. I mean, worst case scenario, I can delay the testing and just do the interviews, but I don't know if there's any free resources. I can't find any.
So we did have free access to user testing, and Alistair's reached out again to see if we can reactivate that, basically. So I chased him. He'd forgotten. I've chased him. I'll ask again. I'm going to stop recording actually, because